Tēnā koutou katoa, ngā mihi ki a koutou. Ko Maurie Abraham ahau te tumuaki o te kura tuarua o Unikiritia, Hobson 4 Point Secondary School. Yeah, great to be here. So I think Carolyn's going to share the screen. Cool, thanks, Carolyn. Thinking about what is a future-focused school, I got this off Twitter, and it really resonated with me because it states quite simply what needs to be the focus if you want transformation. Now, the only reason it was on Twitter is because I put it up there on Tuesday afternoon, so I could grab it back and let it lead off this kōrero. So at least it looked as though I was having somebody clever and important sort of supporting my kōrero. But when you look at this, it does capture my view on what is central to school transformation. And when you look at it, it's also easy to agree with it. But, you have to be really careful to agree with it, because if you do, then you have to be ready for the transformation that will result. Because if you agree with this, you can't stream classes. You can't regulate all of your students to fit into the paradigm of one box. And you can't have rules such as those in relation to uniform that suppress diversity. And, that's without even talking about what it means for teaching and learning. But you've got to realise that if you commit to something like this, then there's going to be things that are different. So that's a word of caution. If we're going to profess to aspire to or hold up a value, no matter what it is, we have to be prepared to lead the transformation that ends up going with it. Can we have the next slide, Carolyn, please? At Hobson 4 Point Secondary School, we've been accused of experimenting on kids and treating them as guinea pigs. My view is that, what we're doing at Hobson 4 Point Secondary School, and that's almost a quarter of a way through the 21st century, it's based on more relevant research than the traditional schooling model. And no one has researched appropriate schooling for Aotearoa more than someone like Russell Bishop. His research shows that if you're not teaching up there in the northeast, that top right-hand box, then you're causing damage. The combination of high teaching skills and high relationships, which we call warm and demanding in our school, is what the northeast is all about. If you're a great proponent of teaching skills, you're considered a great teacher and you're up in the northwest because you haven't got low relationships, then you're causing damage to kids' learning. And just as importantly, if you're down in the southeast and you've got real warm relationships with kids, but you haven't got high teaching skills, you're causing just as much damage. Can we have the next one, Carolyn? Here's a brief summary of a Google search I did on effective 21st century schooling. And, I invite you to look at these and look at them closely. Is your school structured in such a way that enables these elements, or is it structured in such a way that makes it easier for teacher-centered and teacher-controlled learning, with students working by themselves on the same things at the same pace as those of the same age around them? Next one, please. We've distilled all of that research and everything we've come across down to these elements. We could do a whole workshop on just this slide alone. At school, at our school, we die in the ditch for those 3 C's. Learning. Thank you. Learning needs to be connected, co-constructed, and collaborative. But to make those come to life in a school and to really focus on them, we had to transform the school model in relation to curriculum and pedagogy, because the traditional model did not allow for these things to flourish and to grow and to be present. Next one, please. Another driver for us is that, in our view, too many schools have become institutions of measurement rather than institutions of learning. And I know what type of institution I want to be leading. So, this view also has played its part in the design of our school. Next one, please. So what does it look like at our school? There's a whole day, if not more, workshop on what's on this slide. It's the favourite slide of mine about our school. So if you look at the vision, every school has a vision, and you could say it's just a collection of words, but I really love our one because the last half of it describes exactly what we want our graduate to be like. We want empowered learners, so people who know how to learn and people who want to learn. But we want them to do that so that they can make the world better. And we've worded it as contribute confidently and responsibly in our changing world. So that describes our graduate. So if we have students who only graduate with top qualifications, then we're not meeting our vision, unless they also have the desire and the capabilities to actually they want to make our world even better. So as soon as we settled on that vision, we thought, right, we've got to then look at the two pathways to excellence. We can't just focus on academic excellence. So we set out right from the beginning saying there should be two pathways of excellence, both academic and personal. Now, there's a bit of a challenge there because the academic pathway is already well structured. You know, we've got a New Zealand curriculum document with learning areas, with achievement objectives, with curriculum levels. And we've got NCA, so it's really well structured. But you can't say the same for the dispositional curriculum or the personal curriculum. And so we're 8 years into our journey as a school, and it's taken us a good 8 years to be where we are with what does a pathway to personal excellence look like. And if you drop down to the bottom right-hand corner of that slide, and you'll see this thing called Hobsonville Habits. Those are the 10 dispositions that we settled on as we were designing our school, that are sort of like the equivalent of the subjects for the academic pathway. These are the dispositional elements that we think if kids are strong and can flourish in those, then they're going to be able to meet that personal excellence. Now, we used to believe and we used to say that academic excellence and personal excellence were as important as each other. We now definitely believe that personal excellence is much more important. And that's because the world's a really complex, changing place. And that view that the personal is more important than the academic has certainly been reinforced by our experience over the last 18 months with COVID. And so, and like other schools, we have a mission: innovate, engage, and inspire. And you say, well, so what? It's just a collection of words. Anyone could say those things. So we didn't want to just say those words. We wanted to bring them alive. So we turned each of them into a principle. So how do we innovate? Well, in a secondary school, we're going to do that by personalising learning, because we don't think secondary schooling does that very well. It's quite innovative to try to do it. What about engage? Well, we're going to do that through powerful partnerships, because in our research, we found out that 21st century learners need to have as much of their learning as possible that's authentic. So how can you make learning authentic? Well, you get them to match up their learning and the outcomes of their learning with the real world, with people out in the real world. And then the inspire, which is the one I love the most, is around about deep challenge and inquiry, because I've been in this game for just over 40 years now, and I haven't met one kid who's truly inspired by chasing credits. But, you know, in my journey through 2 decile 1 schools and a mid-decile, and now at Hobsonville Point at a high decile school, every kid I've met is inspired if they can delve deeply and ask questions and find answers about stuff that they're really interested in. And this principle really came to the fore when we were thinking in 2015, what are we going to do? And we've got year 11s next year. What are we going to do about NCA? And we were so tired, we were innovated out, and from the battle we were having to push back against people, that we almost went with what every other school was doing with NCA level 1. But we came back to these principles, and we said, if we really believe kids are inspired through deep challenge and inquiry, then we can't expose 14 and 15-year-olds to a year and to a tsunami of assessments for a qualification that has just no currency at all. So that's when we rallied again around our mission and our principles and decided that we needed to do something different. And so that's why we didn't go down the NCA level 1 pathway. And then finally, coming to the values, and I've done a lot of thinking about values, you know, even thinking about the word value. As soon as you call something a value, you've actually said this is the most important thing to us as an institution. It's the most valuable thing. So, you know, if a school says it values diversity, but then it has everyone wear a uniform, or it streams its classes, or it has rules around hairstyle and jewelries and things like that, then it's not valuing that. So it has to either change its practice or it has to throw that value out and put another one in, like exclusivity or uniformity or something. So, values, you've got to look at them and say, are they the most valuable thing? So when we look at excellence, inquiry, connectedness, collaboration, and innovation, in our project work, which we do all day on Wednesdays, right from the beginning, the only thing we've assessed those projects is against our values. How strong is the kids' inquiry? How connected were they? How collaborative were they? How innovative was their work and their outcome? And how excellent was it overall? And then when we think about our school's prize giving, and a prize giving actually tells the kids in its community the things it values the most. And most schools obviously value the top kid in English, the top kid in maths, the top kid in science, because that's what you see. But at our school, at prize giving, the first layer of prizes are the Hobsonville Habits prizes. Who's been the most adventurous? Who's been the most compassionate? Who's been the most resilient? And then our next level of prizes are our values, because they are our most valuable thing. So who's exhibited the strongest in inquiry, in connectedness, collaboration, and innovation? And then we bring in excellence. So just like every school, we have a DUX, that's academic excellence. But sitting beside it of equal value is the personal excellence, which student has developed and shown the most values and habits across their time at school. And then sitting over the top of that, we have overall excellence, who's been the strongest on the academic pathway and on the dispositional one. And now we're looking at a graduate profile at our school, because our kids just graduate with a record of learning of the academic pathway. We haven't really got anything for them for the personal excellence pathway. So we are, our kids are collecting work and tagging them against the values of inquiry, connectedness, collaboration, and innovation. We've developed these rubrics around them, which talk about them being developing, proficient, and adaptive. And they collate their work throughout the year. We're piloting it this year. They get it signed off by the teacher, and it sits in all of those kete. And then when they graduate, our plan is that they will open up their excellence kete and put in their best example of inquiry, their best example of connectedness, of collaboration and innovation. And all of these are also linked to the habits. So when they graduate, they have their record of learning for their academic excellence. And they'll also have this digital kete of their excellence with all of their work around how well they've been on the dispositional curriculum and on our values. So I think it's really important for schools to understand their equivalent of these sorts of things and to say, are they the truth? And if they're not the truth, schools either have to change their practice or change what they put out there as what's representing them. I just think there's one more slide, Carolyn, for this bit. Cool. So this is just a real brief, quick touch over what our curriculum looks like. Now, most secondary schools I've worked with and I've worked in cover the curriculum in one way. They've gone to the back end of the curriculum, turned the learning areas into subjects, and allocated so many hours per week to those subjects. And then a kid's timetable is full up of 25 one-hour blocks of all of those subjects. And that's how the curriculum is covered, totally ignoring the front end of the curriculum. In our school, there are three main elements of the curriculum that our kids experience, with our learner at the centre. They work on Wednesdays on our learning projects, which have a real focus on partnerships. They have to partner up with somebody in the community, if you think back to our principles, and that the values come to the fore, because that's how we assess them against the values. Then we have our learning modules. That's the closest thing to subjects. Those are subjects all connected together, so that specialist subjects are able to have students develop the important concepts and bits of knowledge and skills and capabilities within those specialist subjects. And then we have our learning hubs, which is where the values and habits really clearly sit. It's sort of like a form class on steroids. And it's the most important group that our kids belong to, is their learning hub, where they work at developing that Hobsonville habits in the dispositional curriculum. If you remember that diagram I had of the curriculum, and I talked about learning hubs, so this is just that little sliver of that diagram. This is the most important class that a student belongs to in our school, and the hub curriculum is the most important element in our curriculum, in my view. And that's because it's really where the personal excellence stuff, the well-being is focused on, and the connections are made. And we didn't create this for COVID. It's been like this since we started 8 years ago in 2014. But I do believe that our hub model is the key to as why our kids are doing as well as they are. Lots of schools after the first big lockdown last year thought, hell, we've got to find ways to keep connected with our kids. We've got to keep finding out ways to make sure their well-being's looked after. So they created systems and structures for that to happen. But, we didn't have to do that. And we just sort of rolled out our model, which we found really, really great for our kids. Next one, please. Cool. I don't expect you to really get your head around that because this is another full day workshop. But, our hub, groups of 16 kids with a teacher called their learning coach, 2 80-minute, 1 60-minute blocks a week. So a big chunk of time, small groups. And we've got a real clear, strong curriculum for it with a different concept each term. Whanaungatanga in term 1, huarahi ako in term 2, manaakitanga in term 3, and rangatiratanga in term 4. And interspersed all throughout this is well-being, connection, and all of our habits and values. And so when we jumped into COVID in March last year, this is how we structured our learning for our students. And I'm not going to go into great detail, and you might not be able to see a lot of that, but this is what we developed. And I'm sure you guys all did the same thing. You had a look at what's learning going to look like. And we did this by meeting with groups of students and with teachers on a Sunday afternoon before we went into lockdown on the Wednesday. And we rolled it out. And then after a week or two, we did some refining based on student feedback. But a couple of things I just want to highlight. In the middle there under manaakitanga in relation to learning information, we went straight to reduced timetable. So 4 45-minute blocks rather than 4 80-minute blocks. But that timetable only exists so that if a teacher needed to run a Google Meet, then they would have to run it in that time so there were no clashes. We didn't expect kids to be working on that particular subject in that particular time. The learner planner down in the bottom left-hand corner under ready and focused and connections and order. So there's a link there to a planner that's built around our values and our habits, where students complete that every morning at just before 10 o'clock and share it with their hub coach. So we're giving them a platform on which they can show that they're self-regulated so that they can do their planning of their learning. And then the other one to focus on is in the middle at the bottom there under manaakitanga and connection and order, our concentration on being compassionate and keeping in touch with each other, and a link to our online guidance counsellor service that they could access at the same time. So I just hope you see, looking at that, you can see our values and our habits all the way through it. And so I've only had about 24 hours to look at the student survey. We've got over 400 of our 680 kids have replied to it. So our kaiarahi asked some really cool questions about, where they needed support, and they put up the tapawhā model, and kids can talk about where they needed support. And one of the questions here is that, did they like the way the week was structured? That was shown in that previous thing. And to have 78% of them say, yes, we like the way the week was structured was really cool. But then when they asked them, are you sticking to the timetable when doing your classwork? Well, only 10% said yes. So they liked the way it was structured, but they weren't following the timetable because they were self-regulating. They were doing the work when they needed to do it, when they could do it to fit around their own whānau, etc. And then the question, do you feel you need more support in your classes? Well, it was great to have 50% say, no, I don't need any more support, but 13% said yes, and the rest sort of said maybe. So we needed to think about how can we support those other students who need some support. And so the staff are going to be working on this over the next week about how we can provide more support for the others. But we don't need to look too far because the rest of the survey gave us some answers. So could I have the next slide, please? And so we asked, the kaiarahi asked them, what's the best way to engage with your teacher? So, half of them said we prefer Google Meet rather than just Google Classroom posts, because they like the face-to-face. So that was good, but we've got to remember that's demanding on staff and on kids. Excuse me. But what came through very strongly was their preference for all the work, for all of their classes for the whole week, they want posted by the start of Monday. And so what that tells us is that the students love the ability to self-regulate within the framework. And when we also consider that only 10% of them are working according to the timetable, then it was even more important that staff get on board and post that work right at the start of the week. If staff were posting it at the start of their block, or even at the start of the day their block was on, then kids were missing out on the opportunity to self-regulate because only 10% of them were following that timetable. And what the other strong thing that came through was that they like these short, less than 5-minute teacher videos to support the work posted in Google Classroom. So again, that's more about self-regulation. You know, I can see the work in Google Classroom. I can hear it being spoken to at a Google Meet if I have to go to one. But if I've got this Google, this little video clip from the teacher, I can keep going back to it when I need to support my learning. I really love the messages around wanting to self-regulate. Now, what the messages that we're getting from here is that the kids are saying we want to self-regulate and we know how to self-regulate, so keep enabling us to do it. And I think it's a really cool message, because we can't forget about staff well-being as well. And you know, my staff have really clearly got the message that all I'm expecting from them is for them to do their best. The first thing they concentrate on is their own well-being and the well-being of their whānau. And then with what they've got left over, they concentrate on the well-being of their kids, not on the learning of their kids, but on the well-being of their kids. And so we had our whole staff Zoom, which we have every Tuesday at 9:30 while we're off site. And I shared with them some of the initial stuff from the student voice. I finished off by saying, this isn't being shared with you because I'm demanding more of you. What you're doing now is good enough. It's the best that you can do and it's good enough. Don't see kids saying we want more Google Meets and we want more video clips. That means you've got to go out and do that. That's not what we're saying, because we've got to concentrate on your well-being as well. And then I'm also in the practice of every morning, 8 o'clock, I send just a quick whakawhanaunga email to all of the staff. And so this morning's one. It's, you know, it's not a lot of information, but it's just a quick check-in that goes out every morning so we can concentrate on making sure that, you know, they're getting looked after. And all the messages that I send out to the staff on these emails and on our face-to-face every Tuesday is all around their well-being, making sure they've got the capacity to look after other students' well-being.